In Los Angeles, a lot of apartment buildings look like this. They're all from the 1950s and 1960s and feature a distinctive built form and style. Called Dingbats, these are 2 to 3 story wooden boxes covered in stucco, featuring carports or garages at the ground level. They are typically built on single-family lots and maximize their footprint by leaving little room for a yard or common space. And most strikingly, they have signage or decoration that evokes strong feelings of mid-century nostalgia. The name Dingbat comes from the ornamentation, which can be similar to the various stars and shapes of typographical dingbats. The multiple units above carports found at Dingbats provided a cheap solution to create dense housing while also storing cars, which became a lot more useful to the average California family as the freeway system was being built. While the single-family home was seen as the family's end goal, the Dingbat provided a compromise, where everyone had their own parking spot and exterior-facing door, but still shared space with others. Since they were so cheaply built, the actual units inside Dingbats are unremarkable, often with thin walls or awkward floor plans. The only interesting or distinctive feature of the buildings are meant to be experienced from the outside. Any signage, decoration, or lettering is large enough to be clearly read by passing cars. This is so the buildings can function as billboards advertising themselves. Over the years, critics have derided Dingbats, calling them a bad idea run amok, or Los Angeles architecture at its worst. Some of their criticism is valid. Dingbats are often old and not well maintained by absentee landlords, and the cheap building materials exacerbate this. They also lack quality common space for socialization. In being a compromise between apartments and single-family homes, Dingbats can have the negative features of both. Although Dingbats often face criticism for their styling being dated or tacky, their ornamentation is so critical to what makes them interesting. They're basic, simple, and cheap structures. They're purpose-built, affordable housing. But with decoration, naming, and theming, they feel so aspirational and embody the California dream. Even though a lot of Dingbat ornamentation is simple, or has been removed as their mid-century design language fell out of style, there are still several remaining examples of highly decorated or themed Dingbats. This one in Palms, Los Angeles, is themed in an Italian Renaissance style, with a small fountain and other intricate details. This Dingbat in Santa Monica is themed like some kind of Swiss chalet or Bavarian cottage with diamond lattice windows and decorative trim. This kind of theming places emphasis on a mood or feeling rather than architectural accuracy. Other European-themed Dingbats feature a generic title in a foreign language to add a touch of luxury to an otherwise basic structure. Also pervasive in Dingbats are Polynesian or Tiki themes, like this one in Redondo Beach. Near the coast, Dingbats reference generic nautical themes. Looking even further, there are some oddly specific themes, like revolutionary Cuba. And since Dingbats have earned somewhat of a reputation for being low quality, some poke fun at this stereotype, like the crappy apartments in Palms. But some Dingbats don't really have a theme, and instead have lamps, which are prominently displayed, and sometimes framed by other features. Many Dingbats, like this one, have had their theming stripped away as mid-century motifs fell out of style. We can see in this photo from Ed Ruscha's 1965 book, Some Los Angeles Apartments, that this Dingbat in Manhattan Beach was once called Lee Tiki. Today, the Tiki theming may be gone, but when you peek into the courtyard, the lush greenery feels a bit like an exotic oasis. This green space is sort of rare, but shows up in Dingbats with 2 buildings stretching between multiple lots. Looking outside, it still has plenty of garages, just like every other Dingbat. This configuration is simply called a double Dingbat, which allows for more units without increased height. Buildings may be attached or detached, and often have different numerical addresses on each side. During the 50s and 60s construction boom, the dingbat aesthetic spread to even larger apartment buildings, like the Tropics and Stardust in Gardena. At its peak, dingbat production helped LA County build over 700,000 units of housing during the 1950s. But by the 70s, LA and surrounding cities started to change zoning laws to require 1.5 or more parking spaces per unit, which was difficult to achieve with the dingbat form. Also, Los Angeles had banned parking that forced cars to directly back out into the street, which limited dingbat configurations. In sort of an ironic twist, the desire for off-street parking that necessitated the dingbat became its own undoing. When the rules changed, the dingbat gave way to larger, more expensive apartment buildings, where the entire first floor or basement is dedicated to parking. While they can't be built anymore, existing dingbats still remain quite affordable in comparison with new construction. LA County alone has more than 10,000 of them, and most people who call them home don't even realize they live in a dingbat. And the fact dingbats are illegal to build is why so many of these relics of the 1950s and the 1960s remain. It's not economical or worth the effort to tear down a dingbat when the replacement would be so much more expensive to build. Instead, dingbats will simply keep receiving fresh coats of paint, or occasionally some new cladding to make them appear more modern. As times change, dingbats have had to adapt in ways other than aesthetics. Since so many are built upon carports, which is a soft story, older dingbats in particular are extremely vulnerable to earthquake damage. While looking for dingbats, particularly within the city of LA, one can see them being retrofitted to meet modern seismic codes. Today, with California's ever-growing housing crisis, some have called for a new era of dingbats by loosening the restrictions that make them so difficult to build. One where we can construct thousands upon thousands of cheaply built multifamily homes in a few years to boost housing supply and encourage walking and transit use. Dingbats have been hailed as a form of missing middle housing, since they offer increased density over single-family homes without the need for high-rise apartment buildings. However, it's nearly impossible to bring back dingbats as they once were. Fire codes, earthquake resilience, and today's building materials will necessitate a different built form, even if zoning is loosened. Also, the parking that was so integral to the design of dingbats would be better utilized as more housing in places that are trying to shift away from car dependence. To explore how dingbats could be adapted for the future, the Los Angeles Forum for Architecture and Urban Design held a competition called Dingbat 2.0, whose winning entries are documented in a book of the same name. These concepts range from splitting up dingbats into small single-family units to densifying existing dingbats by building upward. But for now, some dingbat-like buildings are still being built. For instance, where zoning allows it, some new construction in Southern California looks like this: a few townhomes where 1 or 2 single-family homes were before. They often look similar to one another and feature housing above garages and little to no lawns to maximize useful space. However, they tend to only have 3 to 4 units instead of 6 to 10 units like dingbats due to parking requirements and other building codes. Therefore, these townhomes cannot be as affordable as dingbats. And the prices show that. Units can go for well over $1 million in wealthier neighborhoods. To make multifamily housing more affordable, we must loosen the grip of parking requirements and allow more units to be built. In conclusion, dingbats are a contradiction. They promote urban density while also facilitating car-based urban sprawl. While they could certainly be improved, they offer some valuable lessons on how we can develop more affordably in the future, particularly with how cheaply and quickly they were constructed. And I think their theming and aesthetic is also worth preserving in some way. In the end, dingbats are just a form of cookie-cutter housing. Just like the quintessential 1920s California bungalows, or Philly and Baltimore's row homes. There is a lot of utility in making buildings uniform to streamline construction, and Dingbats show that you can build something simple and functional that is still fun and interesting.